On July 20th, 1985, a diver named Andy Matrochi descended 54 feet into the Florida Straits, 35 miles west of Key West, and swam directly into a wall of silver bars, so large his crew would later describe it as a reef, the main cargo hold of the Nuestra Señora de Atocha, a Spanish galleon carrying what the ship's own manifest recorded as 24 tons of silver bullion in 1,038 ingots, 125 gold bars and discs, 180,000 pesos in silver coins, and an unregistered quantity of Colombian emeralds that had been smuggled aboard to avoid the Crown's 20% tax. The manifest alone put the cargo's modern value above $400 million. But historians at the Archive of the Indies in Seville estimate the contraband made up roughly a quarter of everything aboard, which means the Atocha went down with at least $500 million on its keel. The man who spent 16 and a half years looking for it, an Indiana-born former chicken farmer named Mel Fisher, had already buried his eldest son in the search, and the U.S. Supreme Court had already told the state of Florida it had no right to a single coin. The Atocha was built in Havana in 1620 for King Philip IV. She was rated at 550 tons, measured 112 feet, stemmed to stern with a 34-foot beam and a 14-foot draft, and carried 20 heavy bronze cannons plus a rotating battery of smaller swivel guns called versos. Her hull was constructed from Cuban mahogany rather than the traditional European oak, a substitution that made her lighter but structurally weaker. On September 4th, 1622, she departed Havana as the Almirante, the rear guard of a 28-ship convoy carrying the combined wealth of Peru, Bolivia, Mexico, Colombia, and Venezuela back to Spain. Stacked in her hold were 582 copper ingots, 350 chests of indigo, 525 bales of tobacco, and 1,200 pounds of worked silverware, on top of the gold, silver, and gemstones. The fleet was 6 weeks late. Hurricane season was already well underway. 2 days out of Havana, on the morning of September 6th, a hurricane overtook the convoy in the Florida Straits. 8 ships went down. The Atocha struck a reef near the Marquesas Keys, roughly 140 kilometers from Havana, and sank in about 55 feet of water. Of her 265 crew and passengers, only 5 survived. 3 sailors and 2 enslaved men who clung to the stump of the mizzenmast, the only part of the ship that remained above the surface. Among the dead was Bartolomé Garcia de Nodal, the explorer who had mapped the Straits of Magellan around Cape Horn. Spanish authorities in Havana dispatched 5 salvage ships within days, but the water was too deep for their divers to crack the hatches. On October 5th, a second hurricane scattered the wreckage across the seabed. Spain searched for the Atocha for the next 60 years and never recovered a single bar. Mel Fisher started looking in 1969. He had moved his family from California to the Florida Keys in the early 1960s after years running one of the first dive shops in the state, a storefront in Redondo Beach called Sea to Sea. He founded Treasure Salvage Incorporated, recruited a crew willing to work for minimum wage with no guarantee of a payoff, and began dragging proton magnetometers across the ocean floor. He also invented the device that made the search physically possible, the mailbox, a large metal elbow bolted over a salvage boat's propeller that directed the wash straight down, simultaneously clearing sand off the seabed and pushing clean water to the divers below. Historian Eugene Lyon, an expert on Latin American colonial records, traveled to the Archive of the Indies in Seville and discovered that 18th century Spanish salvage attempts had focused not on the Matecumbe Keys, where everyone assumed the Atocha lay, but on the Marquesas Keys, 32 miles west of Key West. Fisher moved his entire operation. In 1973, 3 silver bars surfaced from an area near the Atocha's anchor that the divers nicknamed the Bank of Spain. The weight and tally numbers stamped into the bars matched entries on the Atocha's cargo manifest, which Leon had transcribed in Seville. In July 1975, Fisher's eldest son, Dirk, located 5 of the ship's bronze cannons, and their foundry markings confirmed the identification beyond doubt. 1 week later, on July 20th, 1975, exactly 10 years to the day before the mother lode would be found. Dirk Fisher, his wife Angel, and diver Rick Gage drowned when a faulty bilge pump let seawater flood the hull of the 60-foot Salvage tug, North Wind, while the crew of 11 slept. The boat rolled over and sank at 5:30 in the morning. Fisher's response, repeated every single morning for the next 10 years to a crew that had every reason to quit, became his only public statement on the loss. Today's the day. By 1980, the crew had located a substantial section of the Atocha's sister ship, the Santa Margarita, and recovered 54 gold bars, 43 gold chains, and 12,000 silver coins from her remains. But the Atocha's main cargo hold, the mother lode, stayed hidden. Meanwhile, Fisher was fighting a legal war on two fronts. Florida claimed title to the wreck under its assertion of sovereign seabed rights and forced treasure salvors into a contract, surrendering 25% of everything recovered. The federal government filed a separate claim. Fisher's admiralty lawyer, David Paul Horan, took the case to the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled on July 1st, 1982, in Florida Department of State versus Treasure Salvors Incorporated, that neither the state nor the federal government had any ownership claim. Fisher's company was awarded exclusive rights to every artifact on the site. It had taken 8 years of litigation to secure what the divers were still trying to find. On July 20th, 1985, Kane Fisher, Mel's youngest son, captained the salvage vessel Dauntless over the Marquesas Keys site. Divers Andy Matrosi and Greg Wareham descended along the dive line with a metal detector that began shrieking the moment they reached the bottom. What they saw was nearly 1,000 silver ingots weighing 32 tons, stacked in a formation so dense it looked geological. Around the silver were 114,000 silver coins, masses of coins still fused in the shape of the wooden chests that had held them, gold bars and discs, gold coins, 43 gold chains with a combined length of 180 feet, and approximately 3,000 emeralds weighing up to 77 carats each. Kane radioed his father's headquarters in Key West with 5 words that ended a 16-year search. "Put away the charts, we found the main pile." Within days, the shipper's marks on the silver bars were matched to the Atocha's manifest line by line. Roughly 100 feet from the main pile, divers found a concentration of gemstones so dense they named it Emerald City. That single pocket yielded 13,500 carats of rough emeralds, all originally mined at the Muzo deposit in Colombia, the same source that supplied the Spanish crown in the 17th century and still produces the most valuable emeralds on Earth. The largest rough stone recovered weighed 77.76 carats. The second largest was cut into the Atocha star, a 12.72 carat emerald graded 1AA, the highest classification in the Atocha collection, worth between $3.2 and $5 million. Fisher gave the uncut stone to his wife Deo, and in 1992 it was faceted and mounted in the claws of an 18-pound solid gold eagle statue. That statue was stolen in 2016 from a display at Art Vancouver and has never been recovered. A separate Atocha emerald ring, 5.27 carats, set in a gold band, sold at auction for $1.2 million after a 5-minute bidding war. The total recovered cash, what the team called the Atocha motherlode, eventually amounted to 40 tons of gold and silver, 114,000 silver pieces of 8, more than 1,000 silver ingots, gold bars, gold chains, worked silverware, bronze cannons, navigational astrolabes, muskets, and an estimated $450 million in combined value. About 600 investors, divers, and support crew shared in the distribution. Some pieces went to auction at Christie's in New York in 1988, where the Spanish government repurchased its own colonial silver, and Portugal reclaimed astrolabes built in Lisbon 2 centuries earlier. A single 5-pound Atocha gold bar, stamped with its original mint marks, now routinely sells in the 6 figures at numismatic auctions. Fisher himself died in Key West on December 19, 1998, at 76. His company, Mel Fisher's Treasures, kept working the site.
On a
The stern
featureless seabed
castle,
in the Florida Straits,
the rearmost section of
stern
the ship,
castle of the
where the
Atocha
captain's
lies
cabin
undiscovered.
stored the most valuable
Heavily
personal
encrusted,
cargo,
it endures,
including the bulk of
awaiting
the
the
Muzo
magnetometer
emeralds and
pass that will
additional
reveal
gold,
it.
has never been found. Experts believe the second hurricane in October 1622 broke it free from the main hull and dragged it to an unidentified location on the seabed. An estimated 300 silver bars, 8 bronze cannons, and roughly 64 pounds of raw emeralds remain unaccounted for. As recently as June 2026, Captain Drake Nicholas, diving 52 feet down at the Atocha wreck site, 35 miles off Key West, pulled a 22.5-pound silver bar to the surface. The first silver bar recovered from the Atocha since 1999. His crewmate Blake Baker estimated that 64 pounds of Muzo emeralds are still down there, embedded somewhere in the sand within 200 yards of the anchor location the crew calls the Bank of Spain. The site sits in only 22 feet of water in places, shallow enough that a recreational diver could touch the spot where a 400-year-old fortune is still giving itself up one bar at a time to anyone stubborn enough to keep showing up and saying the same 4 words every morning.